fun, inshallah. I'm not going to go, like I said, I'm not going to go in so much details, but I will at least cover what Tafsir al-Qurtubi was covering, at least in terms of those ayat. So why did Tafsir al-Qurtubi even go into that? Because he was explaining this one. So the ayah says, هل ينظرون إلا أن تأتيهم الملائكة أو يأتي ربك أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك. So that was the portion that he was explaining, which is أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك. Do they see? Or in other words, it isn't necessarily do they see, because this isn't an interrogative clause here. It is more, we did talk about the hal, so this is more to describe the intensity, the intensity of something, which is Judgment Day, or even when the malaika would come to this person, basically announcing the termination of his life, or أو يأتي ربك, and we went in different ayat and we said يأتي بعض آيات ربك, or جاء ربك والملك صفا صفا, meaning on Judgment Day, not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would physically come. And we did talk about that quote that al-Qurtubi had quoted and said that we, as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we don't necessarily interpret that as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself physically coming, because as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we don't regard that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confined in any particular space or in any particular body or in any particular dimension, and that doing so is basically going to put us within the borders of considering a limit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or considering some form of an anthropomorphization, or considering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is limited or has a certain shape or has a certain body, and basically giving and doing tajseem, basically giving a certain body and limiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to something. And of course, we're not going to do that. So we'll just interpret it based on the other ayat. Now, the part about أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك, or when some of the signs of your Lord Almighty come, and we talked about some of these signs, and basically went over some of what Al-Qurtubi wanted to note in regards to some of these signs. And some of the signs really stand out in all of the signs of Judgment Day. So you look at the signs of Judgment Day, you have the major signs and you have the minor signs. The minor signs are basically going to be, things that don't stand out in a way that is not necessarily explicit. I mean, even the minor signs are explicit. So some of the minor signs, they can also be, a transitioning moment, but it is more localized in a specific area or a specific timing. So if we're talking about minor signs, just as when the Prophet ﷺ talked about the conquering and the conquest of Istanbul, for example, that's a minor sign. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ made it really clear that those are some of the signs of Judgment Day, but the seven signs, or the most important signs of Judgment Day, that it would be not localized in a specific time, not localized in a specific place, and it would be basically the major sign to actually mean that this is marking one of the biggest signs in the universe, to sign and to give an indication that the final Judgment Day and the final days had come extremely close. The Prophet ﷺ had actually mentioned in the hadith that the mark between him, in other words, his timing, and the timing of Judgment Day, and let's say this is the index finger right there, okay? And you have, this is the middle finger right there. I'm just gonna do it like, the index finger and middle finger. And he compared that him coming. In other words, if we were to do this as a graph right there, so this is basically him being marking at really one of the signs of Judgment Day. So even the Prophet ﷺ himself coming is actually in fact, one of the signs of Judgment Day. And the Prophet ﷺ was the last prophet as also a sign of Judgment Day. So all the previous times you had many other prophets actually come, and we are living within this basically graph. Now, how long is this in terms of years? How many years, etc.? Allahu A'lam. How old is the universe, and how many people had lived throughout all this life and all of that? Allahu A'lam. At the end, we just know that we are basically right there just at the end. So the most important signs of Judgment Day, or at least the major signs of Judgment Day, are number one, الدجال. That's one of the major signs. Two, الدابة. And when we say Dajjal, we're talking about the Antichrist. When we say الدابة, we're talking about that creature that basically stamps people on their forehead as believer and non-believer. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. And that creature that comes out of the earth. So now we know Dabbatul Ard, meaning that it's coming from earth itself. It is not some kind of a space creature, but is actually an earth creature. Now, is it already living? Allahu Alam. Do these creatures basically evolve from a different creature that is already existent? Allahu Alam. We don't actually know. Then we also have Ad-Dajjal, Antichrist, or Ad-Dajjal himself. Basically, we know that he goes all around the planet Earth, and first announcing himself as a king, and then a prophet, and then God himself. And we know some of the physical features on a Dajjal, whether we're speaking about one eye that's sticking out, another eye is muntafi'a, so just basically like a raisin, in other words, sticking inside, not outside. So one is going outside and one is basically going towards the inside. And we know that spiky, red hair, we know that bow legs, and we know short, we know basically on his forehead there's gafara. So we know some of the physical signs, and these physical signs uh, are basically things that people ironically will actually describe as a superpower, even though it basically, reflects a deformity, but people will see it as a superpower, ironically. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him superpowers, but these superpowers are basically not miracles per se, but they're called istidraj. There's a difference between a miracle and an istidraj. The miracle basically is to support the person in faith. Whether a miracle called karama for a salih person, or whether a karama for a prophet. The karama for a salih person is not to challenge with it people that are disagreeing with them, but is basically just to give that person support. So it can be just like, during our times, I can think of Abdullah Azim. I was so obsessed with reading his books at one point, and he was talking about a lot of these miracles that were in karamat basically happening to a lot of the salihin. And certainly, I'm sure there are plenty in Gaza happening right now. And I know for a fact that uh, there are many miracles that are still happening to many people, subhanAllah, around the world without us realizing. Now, in one of the favorite books that I had read that also had karamat, and speaking about Zainab al-Ghazali, Ayyam min Hayati, that was one of my favorite books that I read as a teenager. Absolutely loved that book. And and she was talking about a lot of karamat. Anyhow, now the other part is the miracle, and the miracle basically happens to a prophet. Prophet basically to challenge people, just like Prophet Musa alayhi salam splitting the sea with that cane, and of course having that cane turn into a snake, basically gulping up all the miracle, the what are they called, the all the different magic that they were doing, gulping it all up and so forth, and all of these different things there be, or even the splitting of the moon during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or the Prophet ﷺ foretelling them what's going to happen in the future, all of those different things about the about different prophets. Those are miracles. But a lot of the things that the Dajjal will do will, in the definition of in English, it would be called a miracle, but or supernatural, a supernatural thing. So yes, he will have supernatural powers. Let's use that one instead of using the word miracle. So the Dajjal will have supernatural powers. The
Quran.
supernatural powers that the Dajjal will have are things such as the resources. That's the most important superpower that the Dajjal will have. He will go to the city that basically supports him and believes in him, and he will order the earth to enrich with its natural resources. So the natural resources will basically develop, and this land becomes green, full of water, full of resources that are important for basically the growth of the city. And then, of course, the people that believed in him, he'll basically order the earth to suck up its resources. So that acts as a very big fitna for the people that are living at the time. And certainly, not only that one, but he will also manage to convince people that he is God himself, and then convince people that he has the power to put people in heaven and in hell. But the Prophet ﷺ had told us that the real truth of what's happening is that his hell is actually heaven, and his heaven is actually hell. So what people will think that, yes, this person is basically going to hell for not believing in him, it would actually be heaven. It's the biggest fitna ever to come. And the Prophet ﷺ had said that every single prophet that had come ever had warned of the Antichrist. One thing I always think, and it really baffles me, is if the Dajjal is not out yet, people can still be so confused with the smallest, the smallest narratives, the smallest, and it would be just a very straightforward lie. It would be extremely clear that this is a lie, yet people still manage to get fooled with these lies. And you will see the changing of the creation, and you'll see all of that. And people recognize that all of these, cosmetic things of, I guess, fillers and injections and all of that, that's basically extremely dangerous to your body. And that these companies, they basically had chosen to hide the fact of how dangerous and how harmful to you and how harmful they are to you, but you still basically just fell for the marketing that it's going to make you look better, it's going to make you look more attractive, it's going to flawless, and it's going to make you look this way and that way and all of that, 40 years younger and all of that. And sure thing, it will make them look, younger. You see these celebrities and you're like, wow, they really do look younger. But then, of course, what we don't realize is that give it fast forward 20 years, these people will look extremely scary. They didn't age in the right process. And certainly, these people look so scary because of the amount of different fillers, the injections, all these different things. They look so scary with droopy eyelids, droopy face, and droopy breasts, and droopy, you're just going to be seeing a completely different thing. And when they put these injections, you have to keep on putting these injections because if you don't, they're for sure going to be extremely droopy. So they have to keep on putting these injections. And with these injections, they're basically raising their chances of getting cancers, getting basically different kinds of illnesses that are known and not known either. But, subhanAllah, you could still see people falling for it. We're not talking about Jannah here or Nar, which is something that is ghaib, but we know for a fact, the studies will tell you, this isn't ghaib where you really need strong faith to really recognize that it exists, but this is right there, studies actually telling you that these injections cause 1, 2, 3 damage to your brain, 1, 2, 3 damage to your cells, 1, 2, 3 damage to whatever in your body. But still, you would say women, sorry ladies, but you would see women tend to be probably the number one customers for such sales. And certainly when you see where a lot of these fake sales and these fake narratives are, and who the most people that are consuming them are, you would understand when the Prophet ﷺ had said that the first ones to believe in it, Dajjal, are going to be the Jews and the women. You would see the Jews and women, and why women? That's what concerns me. The Jews, I know, I know for a fact that I'm not part of those people, but in terms of women, we've got a lot of homework to work on. And even when the Dajjal goes and puts a curfew in Medina, the Salihin men would tie their women in order to prevent them from going and joining the Dajjal, but they managed to, of course, make a hero of themselves, and that's how they would probably think of themselves. They would think of themselves as heroes. I'm sure these women right there will probably, create some kind of a support group and would create some kind of a narrative that that these guys are narcissists trying to be controlling. They're trying to basically prevent them from practicing their freedom to choose their faith and all of that. And then they would manage at the end of the day to untie themselves and actually join the Dajjal. Very similar today that you would see a lot of the sex traffickers, and I know that for a fact. A lot of those areas, agencies, you call them websites, you name them. And believe it or not, a lot of what is taught on university campuses or of course, presented as education, presented as it's basically giving women their rights and etc. Just like feminism, a lot of the young teenagers and women that are in their early 20s, they're actually consuming it. They're consuming it as if it is, hey, your parents, they're trying to be authoritative, they're trying to be controlling, they're taking away your freedom. Your freedom is to love who you want, and your freedom is to go and basically, display your body, etc. And without them realizing, they're just becoming nothing but easy merchandise for all those that don't want to be responsible and basically father your children, or even, pay for the expenses that while you do your job as a mother, and they'll basically get away with it. And you'll see you just became an easy target for the sex traffickers. And we're talking about sex trafficking is basically right there, looking at one of the growing, and right now some of it is being exposed. Remember with that Epstein file stuff, some of it is being exposed, and it is speaking about almost 33 million girls are actually held in these sex trafficking groups and nets, and without them realizing sometimes they're the ones that actually put themselves in there. Yeah, some of them get kidnapped, but many times they're the ones that actually go to it. They're the ones that go to it, and they don't even realize that they were really going to at least a dajjal and a mini dajjal, not like the big one. But that's exactly what it looks like. That's exactly what it looks like. We have many girls going through to their own perpetrators, and they thought that their fathers, their brothers, their family were basically trying to keep them from practicing their quote unquote their freedom. Just imagine that. And you'll see that the same stream, the same paradigm, the same system, the same way that the gel is right now manipulating the masses. And this isn't the real Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ had talked about many Dajjajila, or many manipulators, many con artists, and many basically of those that will basically act as the Dajjal, because they will be these figures that will pave the way for the real imposter, which is the Antichrist and the Dajjal. So that's one of the things, Dajjal and طلوع الشمس من مغربها, basically the sun rising from the other side. And we are already seeing studies in science telling us that there's going to come a time, because they had already seen, and this is not fake news, all right, but NASA is already seeing that that certain planets do at one point start rotating differently. And and that basically tells us that even Earth may even go through the same thing and actually rotate differently. Well, we already know that as a fact from the ahadith, so this isn't news to us. And for example, the other thing, the Prophet ﷺ, part of the signs of Judgment Day, he told us that time would basically become faster. And we already know, although scientific studies are telling us that we're speaking about parts of a second, but at the end of the day, from what we know right now, we're speaking about a certain amount of parts of a second. So I guess we wouldn't even notice it, but will it one day be something significant? Allahu A'lam. But when you look at the signs of Judgment Day, the Prophet ﷺ was already telling us that aging, that earth aging, people aging, the sun aging. And when we say aging, that means it is coming closer to its end. It's coming closer to its end now. What are some of the signs of Judgment Day? So we talked about the sun. We also talked about, well, if you're talking about the Dajjal, you're also talking about Prophet Isa alayhi salam coming. So the second coming of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, basically to bring about one, the da'wah, and two, bring about the end of the Antichrist, the end of the Dajjal. And Prophet Isa will only live for a small amount of time, not a very long time. And then after he dies, basically the fitan will come back again, as if the fitan were not eliminated at one point. But the fitan, and all those fitan will come back again and again, and you will see zina in the streets, and you will see all of those things basically that were at one point known to the people, at least some good. So right now, we still have people, one, memorizing Quran. In fact, we're actually in a stage that is considered, wallahu a'lam, a little far from the real end of times. I'm talking about our own time, but you want to keep in mind that the Prophet ﷺ, every single Friday, he would never say, we're far. Yeah, there are these signs that still didn't come, but he would basically live like every single Friday. It can be a judgment day. It can be the day of Judgment Day. Even when they had a lunar eclipse or a sun eclipse or a solar eclipse, he basically also rushed like it was a sign of Judgment Day. All right. So, but when you're looking at the questions people may usually ask, and they may sometimes wonder, it's like, okay, well, when you speak of Judgment Day, so looking at the hadith, okay, let me say, looking at the hadith and keeping in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ أَيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا. And of course, at the end, إِلَى رَبِّكَ مُنْتَهَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one to know. And when that Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to the Prophet salam, he said, أخبرني عن الساعة, he said, ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من الساعة. All right, so there's no question. فيما أنت من ذكرها. That's it. There's no question, no prophet, no one basically knows the last hour and when it's going to come, and therefore to say, oh, it's not at this time or it's that time is basically not acceptable whatsoever. But I'm here trying to say, looking at the hadith, what do we read? Okay, we know Allahu Alam, but what do we read from the ahadith? From the ahadith, there is a hadith that stands out, perhaps in particular, and I think I talked about this before. This hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ had, no, maybe I can get that hadith out. That hadith really stands out as, something that I always think of deeply. And this hadith goes as follows. تكون فيكم النبوة ما شاء الله لها تكون فيكم. Hold on, let me write that down. فيكم النبوة ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. Okay, I'm gonna go like that. Okay, I'm gonna get that hadith out so you can actually see it. ثم يرفع الله. Okay, let's see this one. Okay, let's see this one. Did they actually? Okay, here we go. I'm gonna put that hadith for you so you can actually see it. And let's see right there. This is the hadith right there. So, عن حذيفة رضي الله عنه. Hudayfa is Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. He was basically that Sahabi that would always ask questions about signs of Judgment Day. So the Prophet ﷺ said, تَكُونُ فِيكُمُ النُّبُوَّةُ مَا شاء اللَّهُ لَهَا أَن تَكُونَ. That prophethood would stay amongst you for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for. ثُمَّ يَرْفَعُهَا إِذَا شَاءَ أَن يَرْفَعَهَا. And then he would lift it. Whenever he wills to lift it, that's when he will basically lift it. Then there will be a khilafah. Khilafah basically kind of like basically the ruling that is after the Prophet ﷺ. But what is really significant about that one is ala minhaj al-nubuwah. It would be basically taking the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ as the foundation for its governance. And then it would stay as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises it whenever He wills to raise it. And then it will be, look at this one, this thumma is letting us know that, let's see, is letting us know that there is some time lapse. Okay. ثم تكون ملكا عاضا. What is الملك العاض? There's going to be basically a monarchy. And this monarchy is going to be عاضا. There's going to be some injustice in it, and certainly this mulkan addan. So whether we're speaking about Umayyad Khilafah, Abbasid Khilafah, Mamalik, Ayyubi, you're talking about Uthmaniyin, etc. We're talking about a number of different years. So we're talking about what? From the time of 41 Hijriya till, well, 41 Hijriya, we're talking about until Al-Khilafah Al-Uthmaniyya, which basically ended March 24, 1923, or is it March 23, 1924? I always confuse these two. But so that would basically put in that mulkan عاطا. And then فيكون ما شاء الله لها ما شاء الله أن يكون. So it stays for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically wills it to stay for. And then ثم تكون ملكا جبريا. Then it is an enforced kind of monarchy. Who's enforcing it? So we know colonization, and basically the imperialist powers, the colonizing powers, they basically had put in all the monarchies that exist in the Muslim countries today. They're basically put in and assigned by basically countries, UK, France, the US, etc. So that's Jabriyan. The word Jabri, what does the word Jabri, which basically is right there. The word Jabri means it was forced upon you. You didn't choose it. It was forced upon you. But this one, it was different. It was that mulkan adlan. No, the people basically accepted it. The people, we could say, not necessarily voted because it wasn't based on democracy, but the people at one point, they basically had made what is considered an allegiance. Okay, they did do some form of acceptance, some form of allegiance, and accepted it as basically, let's call it a legal governance, and took it from there. Okay, now this one is different because this is Jabri. People are not wanting it. Of course, people are not even doing any form of allegiance to it, but it is basically controlling the community and controlling the Muslim world. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where the Prophet says, فَتَكُونُ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَا أَن تَكُونَ. It would last for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically rise it. And then it would be khilafatun ala minhaj nubuwah. And then this is the part that we're in right now. You see this right there? We're actually sitting over this comma right there. Because you could say that we're living in this mulk jabri right there, but this mulk jabri, you saw that the Arab Spring basically brought another mulk jabri, okay? But we're right there. You could see, even experts would tell us, experts in political science, experts and basically studying the situation, the political situation that we're in, and you could see that a lot of the colonizing powers that had been enforcing this mulk al-jabri right there, you can see a lot of political changes are actually coming to a major transition. When you see, for example, Trump coming in, what Trump is doing is really unprecedented, at least from the time of the second and the first World Wars until now. So we're talking about almost 100 years, almost 102, 100 years. Okay, we're speaking about that the world we're living in somewhat of I don't want to say peaceful per se. It wasn't necessarily peaceful, but if you're comparing it to the world wars, it was relatively, let's say, relatively within a certain slow pace. Yeah, political situations here and there, tensions here and there, and then of course, yeah, wars here and there, but it wasn't as massive as the world wars. But of course, there were some international agreements. There were a number of different ways to govern and to make sure that we don't go into, into world wars and all of that. And that was working for a certain amount of time. And then, of course, with Israel getting exposed, with American alliance to basically expose what is called the international law and all of that basically to keep countries basically from attacking and being unjust to other countries is right now unprecedented coming to an end with, of course, right there, you can go to another country and basically commit genocide. And even if you saw, other countries opposing, and even if all the other countries, you had South Africa, you had basically all these countries say, hey, what is happening in Palestine? This is not acceptable. This is a genocide. But then, of course, U.S. superpower comes in and says, no, we're going to have this basically continue. And you know what? We're actually going to sign off from 36 different agreements that were out there to keep the world a safe place. And right now you can see the world is seeing America. Yeah, we're going to go to Greenland. And yeah, we're going to go Venezuela. We're going to go and basically attack Cuba and Colombia and who knows where. And of course, we're going to attack Iran. So we're looking at the fall of international law, the fall of what used to keep the world, at least to a certain point, a safer place. Right now, we are basically looking at al-mulk al-jabri right now. At least, yes, this was talking about the Muslim governance, not the world, but this mulk jabri will soon come to an end because it will not have the colonizing powers basically supporting it. And wallahu alam, what is going to happen with, of course, right now, if America were to invade Greenland, what does that mean? Does that mean that the NATO is going to feel, opposed in that way, or is this going to make Russia feel insecure? What does that mean? And certainly the growing massive power, China is basically growing massive power. And of course, China is, they grow and grow, and they don't necessarily provoke too much because they like to get really strong before you don't realize that they were doing a lot of their homework at home, and that they're actually not using the same type of a bullying language as the US, because China doesn't use the same type of bullying language. They basically considered, with that Xi Jinping, he always wanted to. It's like, let's keep it calm, you guys. Let's keep it calm. Let's work on each other and let the other person not know that you are a growing power, because you need to put your pieces together. And then you'll surprise the other person that you were a growing power. And who knows, are they Ya'juj wa Ma'juj? That takes us on the other side. Are they Ya'juj wa Ma'juj? Allahu A'lam. That's all we could say. Allahu A'lam. Is the wall of China basically the wall that in Dhul Qarnayn, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us about in Surah Al-Kahf, that there's this said, or that there's this dam that was basically to keep Ya'juj and Ma'juj in a specific place? Was that said basically like the wall of China? Some scholars do say that. Allahu A'lam, we don't really know. Although some scholars do say that. Is Dhul Qarnayn, who is Dhul Qarnayn? Was he a Salih person, or was he Alexander the Great and all of that? It doesn't look like he's Alexander the Great, but at the end of the day, was it the King Koresh, King Koresh, who basically was in Kyrgyzstan and those areas? Was it that king that was basically the king that is Dhul Qarnayn? Allahu A'lam. But at the end, is that what concerns us, as at least the signs that we see today, is that we're seeing the collapse and basically signs of a collapse and signs of, let's say, this international law that was at least putting, let's say, some pieces together. And certainly it was also basically controlling the Muslim world as well in a mulk jabri. And they were forcing us into it. A lot of injustice was there. And Allah, the Prophet said, I'm sorry, I keep on saying Allah, but فتكون فيكم ما شاء الله لها أن تكون ثم يرفعها إذا شاء أن يرفعها. Then it stays for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for, and then He raises it. And then a big major transition happens. ثم تكون خلافة. Then it would be a khilafah على منهج النبوة. Then it would be a khilafah basically based on, look at that one, based on minhaj النبوة. So what is going to happen with all of this that people are marketing in terms of secular and democracy and all of that? What happens to all of that? It gets exposed and people don't buy it anymore. People discover that once they thought that democracy was working for them, and once they thought democracy was the rule of people, they'll discover that no, that there were a certain elite, there were certain billionaires that managed to use the media, that managed to use politics to manipulate the masses, and that all of that was actually manipulating the masses into their own injustice. And then people will basically embrace al-Khilafah على منهج النبوة. That's quite interesting. على منهج النبوة, in other words, they go back to knowing منهج النبوة. They go back to learning Islam. And if you were to look at our times, you go back in just 40 years back or 50 years back, people, believe it or not, I mean, I remember I was the only one praying in my family. We're talking about an extended family, uncles and aunts and all of that. I was only 7 years old. And um, I was the only one praying. Uh, my mom taught me Allah barik fiha, but I was the only one praying. And we had almost 27 adults, almost 27 adults that were living within this area. I was only 7 years old. My mom taught me how to pray, but no one else prayed. Um, Prayer was not something that people had actually known. Wasn't something that they really took seriously. You would see maybe Ramadan, yeah, they never missed out on Ramadan. That was extremely serious for them, alhamdulillah. And then right now, everybody is praying. Everybody. I do not know a single person in my family, and I'm talking about, alhamdulillah, a big family, all my uncles and all my aunts and all my cousins, everybody prays. And mashallah, their knowledge of the deen was way better than before. Alhamdulillah, just from my, smaller family, we have a few Hafidh al-Quran. We have, right now, we have many Hufadh every single year, more than the year before it, memorizing the Quran, practicing. And mashallah, we have scholars right now on the rise. And just 40 years ago, I remember when we were living in the US, well, 40 years ago? No, that was 30 some years ago. Okay. When we wanted a fatwa, there was no one to ask, literally. We had to do a long distance call to probably call somebody from the Muslim countries to tell them to go ask a sheikh at the masjid. But we had no one. And yet the situation changed. Right now we have, although, okay, not accredited, but we have many universities, at least Islamic universities we're talking about here in the US. We're speaking about Islamic institutions. You want all women, you've got some, you've got all men, you've got women and men, you've got all of those. And the Islamic institutions are rising and educating the masses, mashallah, in rapidly. So we're seeing people bringing awareness about Minhaj al-Nubuwah. And remember, you don't just control people and say, here's Minhaj al-Nubuwah, here's what I want you to do. No, it's basically people adopt it and people recognize it. It becomes something that they work towards. It's not one person that works towards Minhaj al-Nubuwah, but it's many people working towards it. It's the masses that work towards it. Even you attending this class and listening to it, you are becoming part of that contribution. We're all a part of this contribution. We're all doing what is called al-mudarasa. We are learning together. It's basically a moment to revive Minhaj Nubuwwah. What is Minhaj? Minhaj means paradigm. Minhaj means path. Minhaj means a system. So that's basically talking about a system that goes back all the way to the Prophet ﷺ. There is another hadith yet. Let me see if I can have it right there. Hold on. Maybe before we move on, isnaduhu Hasan. So you're saying that this isnad is Hasan, and let's say there is another tariq, basically another chain of narration, and said that that was Sahih. And let's say in many of the chain of narrations or the narrators are actually in Sahih Muslim right there. Okay. And then we're talking about just different groups right there. Okay, let's see the other website. Let me go to the other website, which is a really good website, which is this one. And let's see what they had to say about it. Okay, so you had another narration in Nu'man ibn Bashir. And they basically said, okay, أخرجه Ahmed didn't really tell me whether this is Hadith Sahih or not based on them. So it's ironic that they didn't actually mention. They usually, oh, here it is. Where is it? At-Takhrij. Where's it? Okay, so they didn't really say it, but at the end of, oh, here it is. Oh, why did I see it? Here it is. خلاصة الحكم إسناده حسن. I don't know why I didn't say it, but isnadhu Hasan. So that's basically a form of letting us know that it's an authentic hadith. Okay, so it's an authentic hadith. Okay, let's go back right there, or I promised that it would be for an hour. So I'm just going over some of those signs, and some of those other signs. We're talking about the sun going out from the west, and the other part is, so wait a minute. Maybe I should go to this one again. So is this a major sign or a minor sign? This is a minor sign, not a major sign. Okay, not a major sign. This is a minor sign. But this is the spooky one right there. All right. Then he said, then it would be a khilaf ala minhaj an-nubuwwah and then thumma sakat. That's the spooky, that's the scary narration that I wanted to get to. Thumma sakat. Why was he quiet? Because right after it, there are going to be all these fitan that people will be falling into. Fitna after fitna, trial after trial. And that's basically that moment when you would say, is it the Dajjal? Possibly. And Dajjal is going to be coming from an area of Khurasan. So we're speaking about that area, Afghanistan, or perhaps Kyrgyzstan, or perhaps, those areas. And of course, that was considered as Iraq al-Ajam. Iraq al-Ajam would be Iran as well. Okay, Iraq al-Ajam. Okay. Now, when you look at all of that, does that mean we do have other ahadith that talked about the coming of the Dajjal and how they would learn about it and how they would go investigate it? And we do have other ahadith that speak about different wars happening in the Middle East and basically in, to be exact, in the Levant. We're speaking about Syria, we're speaking about Lebanon, we're speaking about Palestine, and that those basically act as the prime areas of what will be demonstrated worldwide. So, in other words, what you see in Palestine can actually act as a transition that you may not see. I'll give you an example. What happened in Gaza, we've had wars that happened that killed more people than the number of people killed in Gaza. We've had many wars, but same thing if you were to talk about a lot of different battles that happened in Muslim history. You had many battles that in Muslim history, they were basically mentioned, and yet the the main battles that deserve the most mention were basically those battles like Badr, like Uhud, like Ain Jalut. Those were key battles. And when you say key battles, you're actually talking about not necessarily the one where the most numbers were killed in. No. Sometimes a key battle is the battle that causes the biggest implication, the major change, the real transition. So when you look at, for example, what happened in Gaza, that globally acted as a key change globally, not only in the Middle East, absolutely not, but this was a global thing. This was a global thing that went beyond Gaza. This exposed a whole system. This exposed the whole system of alliances. This exposed the whole system of these superpowers and how justice and how human life is nothing but a sale that they would basically sell to the people like they care about human life, and that Gaza exposed that these people are nothing but after their own interests and nothing but bloodsuckers and nothing but pedophile traffickers and nothing but after their own wealth, and that this system is making the rich go richer and the poor go poorer. And this system is nothing but a lie. It's nothing but a lie made for cheap consumption. This is what they're realizing. And who exposed that? Gaza. It wasn't like people didn't know about it. Well, only perhaps professors knew about it, people that really care to learn and study political science, or people that really care to follow up with what's happening. But right now we're seeing Gen Z exposing all of this. Wait a minute, I thought these were the stupid kids. What happened? If the stupid kids are right now, or what, is stupid, I mean, this is to be basically letting us know if somebody that is naive, if somebody that is considered not educated, if somebody is basically considered on the line of at least the ones that we don't consider at all. They were the ones to even be out there and on social media actually exposing all of this, and not the adults. In other words, the adults already recognize some of that. But if somebody, it's kind of like if the blind can see, then that's it. If the blind can see, once the blind is capable of seeing, once the uneducated is capable of recognizing and be fully educated about it and basically announce it right there, then you will see that this is marking the collapse and that this manipulation that once worked to manipulate the masses is right now not working anymore, is right now fully exposed. So when you look at that ثُمَّ سَكَتْ, what will happen? Will people then become, looking for another type of consumption again? Possibly. Is it the Dajjal? Possibly. Is it the Ya'juj Ma'juj? Possibly. What is Ya'juj Ma'juj? Is this talking about China becoming? Is this talking about China? Or is this talking about some alliance between the Chinese and who knows, maybe North Korea or whatever, South Korea, all these countries right there becoming some strong alliance, and then right there, what are we looking at? A new set of a new world order that is right now, I guess, battling with the Muslim power. And certainly, is the Muslim power not going to be strong enough to defend itself? And that's why ثُمَّ سَكَتْ. Who knows? What are we looking at? We're just seeing some of those maps on global power and letting us know that that as a Muslim, you cannot just stay silent. You either become a soldier, and I mean soldier not necessarily military, but I mean a soldier to mean a person that is investing in bringing good, in bringing justice, in bringing haqq, in bringing truth to the individuals, to yourself, certainly, and to the masses. You have to be investing in it. Invest in it, whether in education or whether even if you're making classes for the young children. Yes, these will one day grow and they will be the ones to make the change. And don't underestimate the work that you do. Don't underestimate it, and keep putting in that effort to make a change and a grand change. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will put barakah and will give you as one particular person to basically invest in ala minhaj al-nubuwwah. Don't underestimate any good investment, any good involvement. That's it. At the end of the day, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rabbi, give us the ability to continue all of this. So we'll talk about, inshallah, the tafsir. Sorry, but I'm getting my pain back, so I have to end it. So we'll end, inshallah, right here. So we'll say, Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. We'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. And we will basically start from here, inshallah. Any questions before we end?
نثقل عليك بالأسئلة، خذي راحتك وإن شاء
الله
الله
يحفظك يا رب.
مع